Hey everybody, welcome back. This is DS Yvonne at reprogrammingmind.com, and today we get to hear from Dr. Bruce Lipton, who is a pioneer in the new biology. He's an internationally recognized leader in bridging science and spirit. He's also a cell biologist by training, and he was on the faculty of the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine, and he also later performed some groundbreaking stem cell research at Stanford University. He's also the best-selling author of the book, The Biology of Belief, and he also received the 2009 prestigious Goy Peace Award. Now, in this interview, not only do you get to hear him talking about how to be going about reprogramming the subconscious mind, but he'll also give you some of the backstory on how he was able to discover this and how he found this on this cellular level. Now, before we get into all of this, let's have Bruce Lipton share with you some more about his history and how he got into all of this in the first place.
Well, let's first start off with my story about being a biologist. That when I was very young, of course, I was treated to do two different views of the world, a spiritual view and a mechanistic view of the world. And as a kid, I had doubts about the spiritual view only because those that were citing all those spiritual words didn't necessarily live up to the spiritual words they were talking about. So it sort of like devalued it for me. But I recognized science was really interesting because a scientific truth on this side of the world is a scientific truth on the other side of the world. And that science seemed to be a more valid way to go. And in the process, actually, following in the footsteps of science, let go of spirituality is not necessary to even bring into the equation of humanity. We're genetically controlled automatons. That's what I was taught, and this is what I was actually teaching medical students about. But what happened was when I was doing research at the university, I happened to be in a very unique position back in 1967. I was cloning stem cells. And well, today everybody hears the word stem cells. In 1967, there were only a handful of us in the whole world that even actually knew what stem cells were. And I was cloning them. So I had a great jump, an opportunity to see stuff. And one of the things that I found through my research is that if I put genetically identical cells in three different petri dishes, but change the environment, which is the culture medium, composition just a little bit. That in one dish, the cells in one environment form muscle, in the second dish, the cells in a different environment form bone, and yet again in a third environment, the cells form fat cells. And then you have to recognize where they were all genetically identical. So I said, well, why did some become bone, fat, or muscle? And the answer was not because of the genes, but because of the environment. And all of a sudden it says, wait a minute, I'm teaching genes control life, and yet in the laboratory it reveals that the control of life was ultimately based on the environment that the cells were in. So this was a radical departure from what I was teaching and the conventional belief, which is still in the textbooks about genes turning on and off, controlling life. This turns out to be a totally false assumption. Genes are not what you would say self-actualizing. Meaning genes do not make decisions. Genes do not turn on and off. Genes do not control. The basic understanding is a gene is a blueprint to make a protein. And the proteins are the building blocks of our cells in our bodies. So imagine a giant Lego set of protein parts, of 100,000 different protein parts. And I say, with this Lego set, how you assemble the parts, you can create a brain cell, you can create a muscle cell, you can create a skin cell, a fat cell. They're same parts in different organizations turn out to be different cells. So it's assembly of parts. The parts, the proteins are complex. So and they wear out so that you have to replace them. So A, they come from somewhere, and B, you have to replace them. And it turns out there's a blueprint to make a protein, and that's DNA. And I say it's a blueprint. It's all it is. It just tells us how to make a protein molecule, which is made out of amino acids. It just tells how to sequence it. I say, why is it relevant? The gene doesn't know what it does. The gene has no idea. It's not a thinking thing. It's a blueprint. And I say, well, simple understanding. We go into an architect's office and she's working on a blueprint, and you lean over her shoulder and you say, is your blueprint on or off? And of course, she'll look at you like, what are you talking about? It's a blueprint. It's on and off. I go, precisely. DNA is a blueprint, but it's the nervous system which is responsible for selecting and reading and modifying the blueprints. And the relevance about that is the nervous system adjustment of your genetics is a direct connection of the cell to the environment. So as the environment changes, the cell has the ability to read the environment and adjust its biology to accommodate a change. So we're always being locked into the environment. Okay. And the relevance about that is what I was teaching medical students was that genes control life. And I say, why is that relevant? And I say the conclusion is simple. If the genes control your life, and we recognize perhaps that we didn't really pick the genes that we came with, but they control us, then all of a sudden you realize, my God, my life is being programmed by genes which were handed down to me, and they control me and I don't control them. I am a victim of the world. I mean, if something happens to me, I'm frail, I'm vulnerable, parasites, bacteria, viruses, I'm a victim. That's the belief. And then I turn around and go, well, wait a minute. We now know from the experiments that the stuff that I saw back in 1967 has become a new science. It's called epigenetics. I said, wait, it sounds like the old science. I go, yeah, the old science is called genetics. So when I say genetic control, which is what I was teaching and which most everybody has learned, genetic control simply means control by genes. But then I say, wait, there's a new science. The new science is called epigenetic control. Sounds the same. I say, epigenetic control literally means, and here's the point, epi is above. So when I say epigenetic control, I am saying control above the genes, not the genes, something above. I said, well, what is it? Well, as the experiment showed me back in 1967, it was the environmental information that was eliciting the response to the cell. So I say, oh, the environment is controlling genetics. And that's basically where conventional science says, yep, absolutely 100% true. Environmental signals control. But then I have to also add the fact that they're just getting into in a new field called behavioral epigenetics is that, well, the environment can directly control us. Simple. Walk outside and it's hot out. This temperature will be picked up by your skin, sent to your nervous system saying it's hot. Nervous system adjusts your biology to make you perspire, cool down, and keep your body temperature. I say, wait, walk outside when it's cold out. Oh, different signal. Nervous system reads the signal and then sends information to raise the metabolism, to raise my temperature. So I said, well, what controls the temperature of my body? You say, well, the brain. I go, yeah, but it's based on what? What the environment is doing. So it's an interpretation of the environment. So when lower organisms, I say the environment directly affects the organism and the cells. But when we get up to humans, we have a mind that here's the environment, here's the biology, and between the two is a mind. I say, why is it relevant? Because the signals that finally get sent to the cells is not a direct reading of the environment, but an interpretation mind of what we perceive about the environment. I say, why is that relevant? I say, two people standing right next to each other in the exact same environment can have a totally different response to the world because they're not just reading the signals in the environment, but they're interpreting that environment. And one can interpret it, oh, this is a wonderful, supporting, and loving environment. And the other one goes, oh, this is a scary environment. And they're both in the same place and they have totally different biology. Why? It's the environment and then the emphasis, our perception of the environment. And I go, well, this is really cool. And then I say, well, wait, are all of our perceptions about life right? I said, no. But if our perceptions are running our biology and a perception is incorrect, then by definition, the biological response will not be in harmony with the world because we have a misinterpretation. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, not all of our perceptions are true, but whether they're true or they're not true, the perception will control the biology. And then I say, well, then it's our belief because our perceptions are our belief. I believe this is true. It may not be true, but I believe it to be true. And if I believe it to be true, the signal that will go from my mind to my genetics and my cells is a signal based on what I perceive to be true, but it may not have anything to do with the real world. And this is where the biggest problems come from, because it depends on how we look at the world. And how you look at the world's been programmed, how to see the world. Let's say you grew up in a family where there's bigotry. And we don't like this person, these people. I said, but you're an infant. You don't even know who those people are. But what's the program? Well, if I ever see one of those people, I'm not going to like them. And all of a sudden I say, wow, you have created a perception about something. You've never even met one of these people, but you already have a perception if you ever do meet one of these people. So I say, if you understand that rule, then you understand this. If our perceptions are programmed before we experience our reality, then the reality when we experience is not the way we experience it, it's the way we were programmed to see it. And this is where all of life comes down to this very fundamental issue, Laura. And this is like so important. This is bottom line important. We keep looking at human frailties and vulnerabilities as the source of disease and issues in our life. And it turns out we are so powerful that we are creating. And our perceptions are what create our reality. And if we have a negative perception, then we've created a negative reality, and a positive perception creates a positive reality. You go, oh, that sounds like that. Oh, airy fairy. And I go, wait a second. You ever hear of the placebo effect? The placebo effect is having a positive perception about something you haven't done yet. I take this pill. This is the pill that's going to heal me. Perception. The doctor said, this is the newest, best thing. This is the good one. And you get all excited because I've been waiting for this positive thinking. I'm looking for this pill. I take the pill, I get well, and then it's a sugar pill. And I said, well, then what healed you? It was your belief about the pill, not the pill, your belief. And everybody goes, yeah, that's true. That's called the placebo effect. I go, well, right away, that's the first demonstration, mind over matter, okay? And while that demonstration is going on, people understand that and accept it quite easily. The one other fact is this: a minimum of 1/3 of all medical interventions is not because of the intervention, it's because of the placebo effect of the intervention. And in fact, Prozac and all those SRI drugs for antidepressants have been demonstrated in the laboratory to be no more effective than a placebo. And we buy them because we so believe in it. I say, yeah, but the more you believe in it, the more effective it is too. And then I have to give you a little side effect. Prozac is a great placebo. Why? If I take a sugar pill, it's just totally my mind that has to say it's working. When you take Prozac, there's a side effect, makes your body feel funny. It's like, oh, I took it and I feel it working. That's a better placebo, even though that effect had nothing to do with it, but it was an attention drawing thing that the chemistry is working and the positive belief I hold about that chemistry must be re-empowered. And so that's really good. And we talk about, okay, great, placebo, and everybody goes, yeah. If I don't say this, then the whole thing is lost, and that is this. That's talking about a positive belief. What about a negative belief? And here is the most important thing I could ever say right now. A negative belief is equally powerful to a positive belief, but it works in the complete opposite direction. While a positive belief, a placebo effect, can heal me of virtually any disease, a negative mentation, it's called a nocebo effect, a negative thought, can create everything that's negative just as much as a positive thought can treat everything positive. A negative thought, oh my God, this is not going to happen. It's like, oh, well, guess what? Now it's not going to happen. Oh my God, I'll never be able to heal from this. Okay, now you'll not be able to heal from this. Oh my God, this won't work. And it's like, oh my God, you don't understand. We are creating, and we're creating with our positive effects and our negative thoughts. I say relevance. Psychologists tell us that the programming that we received as children before age 7, which is a developmental programming period, most of the programs are disempowering, self-sabotaging, and limiting. Like, oh, you can't do that. Who do you think you are? You don't deserve this. You're not good enough. You're not lovable. These words that a child hears, there's a conscious meaning behind it that the parent had when they said it. Meaning you're not lovable, but they didn't say you're not lovable at this moment because you are doing X. They just say you're not lovable. I say, why is it relevant? Because a child under 7 doesn't really comprehend what the parents fully mean. A child under 7 just records the words. So whatever the words were, the parents were trying to, stimulate them to do something better, put a needle in them, make them jump, do something better. A child under 7 just listening and recording. And most of these things are, well, who do you think you are? You're not good at this. Parents were doing that to try to, encourage us to do better. But to do that, a child would have to be conscious of what the parents mean when they say the words. And if they just say, you're not lovable, they left out all the rest. Not lovable for what reason? For right now, for this thing. That's left out. You're not lovable is what's recorded. That becomes part of a program. First 7 years is program, download. And then, and here's the scary part, 95% of our life comes from the program. And if 70% of those programs are so disempowering, self-sabotaging, and I say, pretty much represents what happens in your life. So we go forward in life struggling because we have great wishes and desires. I want to be healthy. I want to be successful. I want to have a great job. I want a great relationship. I say, great. I say, yeah, but that comes from the conscious creative mind. The subconscious got programmed. You say, yeah, but I'm not going to operate from that. I say, well, sorry. Science has recognized that 5% of the day we're conscious of everything we're doing. We're paying attention. We're mindful. But 95% of the day, we're in thought, thinking about whatever's next, what we're going to do, where we've been, where we're going, in thought. And so whatever you're doing in the real world while you're thinking, walking, talking, driving a car, doing your job, if your thought is moving into your head, then by definition, your subconscious becomes autopilot. So if I'm walking down the street and I have a thought, it doesn't mean I have to stop walking while the thought is processing. No. My consciousness will go inside, deal with a thought. My subconscious will do the walking. Okay? So I say, well, then it turns out 95% of our life is coming from the programming, and 70% of those programs are disempowering, self-sabotaging. I go, wow, then pretty much your life is shaped by these seven years. And it's interesting because while science is coming across the mechanisms of how we are being programmed to create a life based on the first 7 years, this is not new information. The Jesuits have said for 400 years, give me a child until it's 7 and I will show you the man. I go, well, they knew the mechanics of it. Today we know the science of it, but the mechanics is whatever programming they said, give me the child for the first 7 years, whatever program I put in that 7 years, then it said, I will show you the man, meaning whatever that program is, it will be, that person will become that program. And that's what the facts are. And this has been known for 400 years. And I have to admit, the programming that we're receiving is much more insidious and effective than originally when they knew about this. We've been programmed. And most of our programming is disempowerment.
Okay, so what do you say to the audience members who are thinking to themselves, hey, I've got these limiting beliefs, I feel disempowered, I feel like I have an unhealthy program, or I have bad genes, or I can't quite get my business going, or I never have fulfilling relationships. What do you say to someone who has that kind of understanding and curiosity for being able to rectify these subconscious programs?
So it's not like you're the exception in the rule of a lot of happy people. You are pretty much like most everybody who has been screwed up by programming that criticize us as kids, criticizing us to make us do better. But if a child can't understand criticism and just records the words are totally disempowering. So we are operating 95% of the time. So just to put this in perspective, it's not like whatever you're saying and doing with your subconscious mind, you're paying attention to what you just said and did. The reason why the subconscious mind is doing its thing is because the conscious mind's busy. So by definition, you do not personally observe your own behavior because it's an automatic thing while your consciousness is engaged. Other people observe your behavior, and that's where the problem comes from. But what's real interesting is this. Most everybody's seen a movie called The Matrix. And Matrix is listed under science fiction. No. The Matrix is a documentary. We've all been programmed, and that's a fact. In the movie, the part that becomes interesting is if you take a blue pill, then you go back into the program and life is just the way it's always been, just what you expect, and that's what it is. But they said if you take the red pill, you get out of the program, you stop playing the subconscious programs. So I go, almost everybody out there in our audience has at one time in their life taken the red pill, not knowing they were doing it, but it was so profound. It changed their lives in a day. And I said, when was I? I say, it's like falling in love. And when you fall in love, that first period of that explosion of love is the equivalent of taking a red pill. And I go, look, your life could suck every day until you meet this person. And then you meet this person, and 24 hours later, it's like, it's heaven on earth. Love is beautiful. I am healthy. I'm happy. Yeah. And I say, what was different? And now I can tell you what science will tell you what's different, because here's what it is. Every day up until you fell in love, you were operating 95% from the program. So your life was a manifestation of your program. And 70% is negative, redundant, disempowering, and 70% of your life is struggle. Okay? Because those are the programs. And then when you fall in love, and this is what science found out, you stay mindful. What does that mean? You stop thinking, because what you've been looking for your whole life is now in front of your face. This is not the time to be thinking. This is the time to be enjoying. This is what I'm looking for. It's here. And be here now. Enjoy this. It's like, yeah, that's called the honeymoon. How love is. Oh God, I love it. I've been looking for it. I'm so excited. I got it. And they keep your mind present. I said, what does that mean? It says, when you fall in love, it's the equivalent of taking the red pill because you stop playing the program. I said, what was the consequence of stop playing the program? I said, X number of years of rotten, scary, bad, ugly, and then boom, overnight, beautiful, wonderful, lovely, heaven on earth. And I go, that's the consequence of stop playing the program. And when you see that, it's like, do I have to wait to fall in love? I say, no, but you have to understand, what is the consequence of not playing the program? Heaven on earth. Because then we become the creators we want to be. We are creators. But then we have to recognize from our understanding of developmental biology, childhood psychology, and all that, well, we are creators. We're also given a program to start. And if we don't change that program, then you will create from that program. And as I said, pretty much negative. So that's why we struggle.
So to eliminate this struggle, perhaps you can give us a metaphor as to how these programs get in and then what can be done to rewrite them.
I say, look, I go to the Apple store and I buy a brand new iPod. And on the front of the iPod is something called the touchscreen, which is very creative. I can make a playlist, adjust the volume, the EQ. I can do all kinds of things with it, touch and play. I say, okay, I go buy a brand new iPod and I walk out of the store and I'm all excited and I open up the box and I want to hear something. So I push play. Nothing. Now I'm a little upset. I just spent a lot of money and this damn thing doesn't play any music. And there's a little 7-year-old kid, of course, standing next to me and goes, Mister, you can't play any music until you download some music. So a child's brain's like the iPod. The touchscreen is consciousness. But if there's no programs, you can't play consciousness. So the first 7 years is download program. And then after we're age 7, then we have programs to operate from. Okay? Well, the issue is this. You didn't pick the download. The download came by observing parents, family, community around you. And that's how we become a member of a family and a community. We observe how everybody responds. We download that behavior. Then when we play it back, we're a member of a family and a community. Okay? Well, the reality is this. Then our behavior is principally programmed not by us, not by our wishes and desires, programmed by observing parents and family. And so whatever they downloaded, we become, okay? Until you become aware that, wait a minute, I can rewrite the program. If you don't rewrite the program, you are the program, whatever the heck it is. And you look at your family and there's a lineage in your family of illness. And we used to think, oh, because it's connected in the family, everything connected must be genetics. Even like if they're musicians and they have kids and the kids become musicians, and people immediately, oh, they have the gene for music. It's like, no, they have a gene for music. They learned that was the principal instruction in their life by observing their parents, how they do music and all that. They learned, right? So the idea is this. We've been bought into a system to believe that your fate is predetermined by your genes. And it turns out, no. Genes don't control anything. They just make building blocks. Your fate is determined by your program. And then you say, and let's just help people save thousands of dollars and lots of tears. You ready? Since my program is running my life and my program is creating the issues that I have as an adult, from disease to lack of ability to make a relationship, then, it basically is incumbent to say, what the heck was the programming? I go, well, you were being programmed before you were born. The last trimester of pregnancy programming starts. I say, listen, if a father talks through the belly of the mother into the womb, and the fetus is hearing the father, when the baby is born, it will know who the father is when the father says anything, because the baby's downloaded that voice pattern, or played music to the baby. And then when the baby's born, play that music and the baby will respond. It was already listening and learning. Okay. So it starts in utero and it goes through age 7. And these are the programs that control your life. And then I go, oh, here's a problem. What program did you get when you were 1? You go, I wasn't there consciously. I have no idea what the hell the programs are. I go, well, you didn't know the programs. And then you go, oh man, now do I have to go to a shrink and, let's dig out with the programs? I go, no, save. This is the saving part. Save here. And here's what it is. 95% of your life comes from the program. Your life is a printout of your programs. So I say, oh, then just reflect and look at your life in this regard. This is how easy it is. Everything you like that comes into your life easily comes in because there's a program to allow that into your life. In contrast, this is one, you ready? In contrast, everything you work hard at, sweat over, struggle to make it real, put so much effort in to make it real. I'm working on this. Why are you working so hard? And the answer inevitably, you're trying to override a program that did not offer that in your life, and your conscious mind wants it, and your subconscious mind has no behavior to support it. Then you're in a struggle. Conscious mind, 5% of the day looking for health or relationships or whatever, and 95% of the day, the programs of disempowerment are working, and you can't see it because it's called subconscious. And the reason you can't see it is when you're playing those behaviors. Why are you playing a subconscious behavior? And the answer is because the conscious mind's busy thinking. Oh, so if the mind's thinking, it's not watching the program play. And therefore, we sabotage ourselves, and we're the ones that don't see it. Why? Because the program is playing when we don't see it. And then I also have to admit, sometimes you just catch yourself. You go, oh, I was just like my father. Oh my God, I was just like my mother. And you can see all of a sudden, just for a moment, you were playing those programs. And the fact is, well, that was a little window on something that's operating 95% of the time. And therefore, if you're having trouble with your life, is it because you don't deserve or the universe is against you? We've been led to believe that. And it turns out, no, we are sabotaging ourselves. I say, and how you know? I say, well, what if you stop playing the program? I go, oh, like falling in love? I go, yeah, then what happened? Oh, heaven on earth. And I say, well, how come the honeymoon failed? Because that mindfulness that you kept your mind present at the first glowing of love because it was so spectacular. Why close your eyes now? Later, life intrudes. You have to think about job, chores, work, responsibilities, and also start thinking the behavior you never played, parents, family, that programming, never played in your relationship. Why? Because you stayed in the conscious mind. You created your life based on what you wanted, wishes and desires. But the moment thinking kicks back in is the moment those programs, 70% of which are not supporting you, start playing. And your partner's the one that sees it. And you don't see it. Why? Because the reason you're playing it is because you're not paying attention. And that's where the conflicts of relationships come to bear, where one observes the other's behavior and the other denies they even have the behavior. Oh, well, that's not me. I don't know what you're talking about. And I go, that's not you in your conscious mind, but you're not using your conscious mind. You're using your subconscious, and you can't see the behavior. Well, most people don't know what we're just talking about. So they just immediately jump on the person like, who are you? What kind of behavior is that? And then you realize the one who just made the crummy behavior is the one who didn't see it. So they're the one who's just as surprised as anybody that they just got accused of not being themselves. Why? They didn't see themselves play it. The recipient saw it. But if the recipient doesn't know that that's not the real them, that's the program from underneath, then the two get confused. Then you become the program and your consciousness, and your program running more, then you're more your program than your consciousness. And if your program's not good, that heaven on earth you started with when you stop playing the program will just start to disappear as the program keeps cutting in and taking more and more opportunity. to interfere with your life until it's back 95% of the time.
And would you say that that's why a lot of relationships break up? It's like people end up reverting back to their subconscious programming instead of being more mindful and conscientious and present and in the now with each other?
Almost precisely because they all break up on the people that they started out with turn out to be what they see as different people later on the road. And I go, no, they were the same people, except the programming aspect, which you didn't see in the beginning, because that's when they didn't play it, was hidden until life started to bring back thinking, because now I'm really busy. And then all of a sudden these programs show up. And that is basically the cause of almost all disagreements, because you met someone at a level where you were not dealing with programs. And they are a different person. That's the person that you fell in love with. But as the programs begin to manifest, meaning that they were in there, but they didn't show up, then that great thing that was holding you together starts to come apart.
So they either change or they break up and get a new relationship, which is more or less kind of like the last relationship.
Well, and guess what? You'll find another person with the exact same issue. You love their consciousness of who they really are, but when they then go, default back into the subconscious, they're the same people that you were avoiding the first time, because your own subconscious was involved with selecting a mate that matches your subconscious. We find compliments, there are masochists and sadists, like two extremes, like Jesus, like that's fire and explosion and all that. But guess what? If you're a sadist, your complement is a masochist. If you're a masochist, your complement is a sadist, and they complement each other. Okay, so whatever your subconscious programming is, you will end up finding someone who fulfills the subconscious equation. And that's why you find a relationship, it doesn't work, you separate, you find another relationship, and it doesn't work. You find another relationship, and it's like, same person, different color hair.
Or they'll have the same kind of mannerisms, personality, physical characteristics, etc.
Well, that's part of what are you looking for, because you're projecting something you want in your conscious mind. And if you meet them when they're in their subconscious level, you'll say, well, geez, they have some of the qualities what I like, but then when you see all the other negative subconscious stuff, you wouldn't be involved. But if two come together and they stop playing the subconscious and they just play this beautiful positive thinking placebo relationship based on my belief, this is what I want, that's really great. But that does not sustain, only because subconscious programs inevitably will take over the show again.
All right, so what can be done to change the programs to eventually change the whole show?
Okay, well, the first thing we brought up, and it was really, this is the saving grace of, do I have to, dissect my life and review every one of the things that created the trauma? And people don't realize, if you review the trauma, you're replaying the trauma. If you're replaying the trauma, you're going to go right through the same emotional experiences that the trauma caused. So does replaying the trauma make it better? I go, no. In fact, it can bring up stuff that you've actually tried to blot out, and now it's back in your face again, So I say, avoid that. Avoid that. Just look at what works and what doesn't work. So summarize this, make it simple. There's an old saying, perhaps many people remember this saying or have heard of it, is don't kill the messenger over the message. Our relationships in the past were based on people, messengers, who brought their story into our story, and we made a message of response and relationship by them participating. When the relationship breaks and they go one way, you're left with the message. And we say, well, let's bring the messenger back in here and beat that messenger over the head. And I go, that's a waste of time. It's not the messenger that's causing the problem. It's the way you learned and responded your message where the problem is. You're carrying them. They left you a long time ago. So to bring them back in is like, why am I bringing this person back in? I just want to deal with the message. I say, well, what's the message? I say, where are you struggling? That's your message. It basically says, if you're struggling, it means you're not programmed in this area to succeed. And so if you want to succeed, you look at the struggle and then put it in terms and then make a phrase that reverses that struggle. And that's the one you want to program. So it's like, oh, I know what I want in my life. I'm not having relationships. I suck at relationship. So what do I want my program to be? I love my relationships. I grow on my relationships. I have joy with my relationship. I say, yeah, but when you say that, you don't have that experience right now. I go, but this is the issue. Because your program is not that program. Your program is, this won't work. This is not good. People are hard. People lie. Whatever it is. And so that's the one you're operating from. But you already know the one you want. So I say, oh, well, first step is this. You know the problem you have because of seeing the problem. And I said, well, then give me a statement that's positive present tense that would be the opposite of the problem. I'm great at relationships. I'm lovable in relationships. And that is the program you want to put in, because whatever program you have now is you sabotage relationships, and then it's a matter of reprogramming. And thank God there's reprogramming, because if it wasn't, this would be like the worst life in the world. It's almost like in India caste system. Oh, you were born in a lower caste? That's the rest of your life, baby. Just own it and live with it, But that's a programming.
And I think people do think that that is the rest of their life and are failing to recognize that they do already naturally have a reprogramming mind that can be getting a system update, if you will, so that they can be looking at their lives in ways that enables them to shift their entire trajectory and be able to make changes that are far more empowering.
I know, because we're not aware that there's a program. It runs invisibly. We only see the consequence of the program, but we don't see our participation in making that consequence, because that's the invisible part. And if it's invisible, then I say, well, what's the problem if the cause of your problem is invisible? And the answer is, well, you recognize you have a problem and you don't know where the hell it came from. And then you just check in with your own self. Do you want this problem? No, I don't want this problem. So it must have come from the outside, because it wouldn't be me asking for this problem. I go, your conscious mind didn't ask for this problem. Your subconscious created the problem. So, and therefore, the biggest problem of the problem is if you presume you're a victim. Because if you presume you're a victim, then you say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I just got to live with this. And I go, well, that's the killer. I say, no, you're not a victim. You're a creator. First, you have to own that you created it, and then recognize that that was a program. It wasn't me. And then I can change the program. But if you don't own your relationship to what's happened, then you can step aside and say, I'm just a victim. And by definition, victim means I am just powerless. And then all of a sudden you disempowered yourself, because I'm a victim, which by definition means I can't do anything about it. It's like, no, that's a perception, because you have changed when like the example of love or something like that, that'll do it. It doesn't have to be love with a person. It has to be love doing something, like digging in the garden. Then people become their more joyous, happy self. Why? When they're digging in the garden, they're engaging in behavior that reinforces what they really want in their life. They're in love in the garden. I say, well, what happens when they're in the garden? They're not playing the program. They're gardening. They're not involved with the negative thinking. They're involved with putting the plant in and the roots and the water and all the beautiful aspect of growth. I say, so what happened when they were gardening? They were living in joy. Because why? They weren't criticizing themselves. They weren't playing tapes. I'm not good enough. I'm not this or that. And so it doesn't have to be in love with somebody. I say, no, just being in love with something you do. Being an artist, being a gardener, being a chef, a cook. I mean, a person who stays home and cooks and makes wonderful meals is creating. What are they creating? Oh, they're so caught up in the creation that whatever the programs are, self-critical and all that, pops out. And then they show up at the very end when they serve the meal and say, well, geez, I'm not really good at this. But the fact was, during the making of the meal, if they were so focused on the meal, they were being mindful. I'm paying attention to what's happening right now. And in that mode is when they're personally empowered, because now they're not playing a program. And so all the wonderful thoughts and things that happen when you're doing these things you love are saying, well, this would be your life until you drop back into autopilot. And then all of a sudden you got autopilot life, which is not the one you wanted. And so you can change it. And that becomes a critical level of knowing you can rewrite these programs.
So when you were in the labs and you're looking at your cells and watching them change from a muscle cell to a fat cell to a bone cell and recognizing that it's the perception of the environment that was enabling it to create all these changes. When you recognized this and saw not just the theory, but saw it happening in real life, how are you able to take that same knowledge and apply it to you so that you would have the same benefits that go alongside with having that information?
Well, it was the most exciting thing because when I first started lecturing on this, it was strictly from an academic point of view. I was doing research, I saw the mechanism, how the cells worked, and put it all together and said, oh my God, we can create this healthy, fabulous life if you understand this mechanism. So I got all excited and I wanted to pull people in and say, let me tell you about this mechanism because if you understand, you can have the most wonderful life. And the audience would look at me and go, your life doesn't look that good, Lipton, for a guy who says you know this stuff. And that's when it hit me. It was like, I almost, thank God I didn't because I'd be more embarrassed. I almost responded by saying, well, do as I say, not as I do. And that just hit me as like, wait a minute. If this is so wonderful and creative, then why the heck am I not doing it? I was to turn it around and go, wait, I'm talking the words, but I'm not the words. Because my conscious mind, which has all the awareness, had all the beautiful insights. But like everyone else, I was still operating 95% from subconscious programming. So all that wisdom never penetrated into action. And that was the point of turnaround. I said, well, man, if you don't apply this to your own life, then you can't go on and talk about this. And the joy was, virtually instantaneously, as I applied it, instantaneously, my life changed. Like, wow, it surprised the heck out of me. Wow, I'm controlling this all of a sudden. And with that, then it was encouragement to expand my control over my life and not be the victim and be swayed by other people's movements, because if they weren't going in the right direction, it's called a crowd response. You could be in the middle of a crowd and you're a pacifist, but if there's a riot that breaks out, pacifists will be engaged in the riot because it's a crowd response. It's a field. And the idea is this: you have to, in mystical, spiritual terms, but I put it in quantum physics, is surround yourself with white light. People talk about that. So what does that mean? It says you can walk through the fire. You can walk on the fire. If you have the belief of you're so protected in whatever way you prepare for walking across the hot coals, that white light, that belief surrounds you. You don't get burned by the fire. But at the moment you question that belief, if you're in the middle of a walk and you just have a moment of question, geez, can I really do this? Boom, the white light is broken at that moment, and then you get burned. And I say, well, how does white light just protect you from walking across hot coals? I say, no, it protects you from everything, even poison. Fundamentalists in the South in the U.S. work themselves up into religious ecstasy, and some of them are called snake handlers. And they handle these poisonous snakes. And generally, although about 3 months ago, one of them died doing it, generally they get bitten by a snake. It doesn't have any toxic negative effect. In their state of religious ecstasy, where they're like, God is all powerful and I'm being taken care of and controlled by God. God takes care of me. That's a belief. And I say, and when they're fully into it, many of them drink strychnine poison in toxic doses. I have a great video of that. And the fact about it is what? No harmful effects. And I go, how does that happen? Because their belief is so solid that God will protect them, that the idea of being poisoned doesn't even come into consciousness with them, not even in their consciousness. So I say, well, they drank the poison. Did it affect them? No, because they were not conscious of a belief that poison would be toxic to me. And they drank the poison and went right through the system, came out the other side, mouth to anus, didn't go into the body, just went through. And all of a sudden it's like, and so they can drink strychnine poison, but you have to be almost like a religious fanatic at that level, because that's a state of beyond working kind of conversation that we have. When they get into that state, that they're speaking tongues and all that, I mean, they're out of here, really.
Okay, so just as a side note, Lipton is not suggesting to drink poison to try this out. So we just recognize that people can do this who are in a deep state of being related to that kind of powerful belief level. And Lipton, I'm pretty sure that you wouldn't be chug-lugging the strychnine just to be able to test this out as well.
As aware as I am of this, I wouldn't touch that stuff. And I already know, yeah, but it's belief. And it's like, yeah, but I don't trust my own belief on that one, so I'm not going to do it.
In your course, The Biology of Belief, you talk about skin and perception and enzymes and how our cells have antennas and how they can be reading information from like miles and miles away. Perhaps you can share some information from your course just to give us a sneak peek into how mysteriously amazing and spooky in some regards our bodies and cells really are.
First, let me explain something that I know from biology so that we can start with a biological thing. There are no two people that are identical on this planet in regard to their biology, because if I take cells out of me and try to put it into any other human, the recipient immune system will say, not self, and eliminate your cells. And if you put your cells and try to put it in anybody, whoever receives it, not self, immune system will eliminate. So first thing is this: your cells have an identity. I said, how do you know? I said, because when I put them in, your immune system identifies that they're not yours. So they've got to recognize they're somebody else's cells, and then they eliminate it from the system. And the reason simply is this: you have 50 trillion cells in your body, and most of those cells have antennas that tune into an identity. It's called self receptors. Okay. It's sort of like you can't put cells in your body that march to a different tune, because then all of a sudden you'll have some group of cells moving left and your body's trying to go right, and all of a sudden you can't have that disharmony. So any cell that is not receiving your broadcast must be eliminated from your cellular community, because if it's receiving a different broadcast, it's operating on a different information. Okay, so number one, people differ because of these antennas. Number two, the receptors are antennas, just like television antennas. So they're receiving a broadcast of identity. If I take these antennas off of your cell with enzymes, your cell would become a generic human cell. I can implant it in anybody. If it's a liver cell, I say, look, everybody's got liver, so I can put your liver cell in somebody else. Why? Liver cells are liver cells. It's not yours anymore. I took the identity receptors off. That would be really cool, but you can't really do that as a way of life. You can't just make generic cells. They come with identity receptors on them, okay? So the point about it is this: they're antennas, okay? And when I started to recognize the mechanism of how these receptors, proteins with antennas, then connect to the genetics and the behavior, made a pathway of how an environmental signal was controlling a biological response. Well, most of the receptors, that's what they're called, on the surface of the cell, and again, we see the world because of what? Receptors: eyes, ears, nose, taste, touch, pain, temperature. We read the world through our skin. Cells have receptors not as complex as ours, but they still read light and chemistry and what's going on, okay? So the reality is cells read environmental information and use that information to adjust the biology, okay? When I recognize at some point, well, wait, but each of us is different because of these antennas. My antennas are different than yours. As a matter of fact, if I want to transplant an organ from A into B, I have to look at the antennas of self on the recipient, look at the antennas of self on the donated tissue. If they don't overlap in any way, because it's like a large combination lock, you can get overlap, okay? If they don't overlap, this graft would be rejected virtually instantaneously. But if I can find that some of mine overlap with the other ones, okay, the more they overlap, the closer the identity. The closer the identity, the less the immune system will be aggressive in eliminating the graft. So that's why they do what's called tissue matching before they do a graft. Got to put in a self-similar one, okay? So my cells are receiving a broadcast. And he said, well, it's coming locally from my head, and that's what's controlling myself. I go, and now here's an experiment that'll blow your mind. I take cells out of my body, spin down a lot, put them in a petri dish, move them 40 miles away, put an electrical readout device like EEG readout for cells in the dish to read the electrical activity. And I could bring the readout into this room where I am right now, a little, computer screen with a readout of my cells 40 miles away, right? If I elicit an emotional response, instantaneously 40 miles away, my cells will engage in a lot of electrical activity. Mona, I have an emotional response. I go, wait a minute. They're my cells, yeah. And my emotional response is localized here. And I go, no, your emotional response is an energy. And the energy is like a broadcast. Wherever you put the television in the field, it's going to play the show. So if I take some of my cells out, which are like little televisions because they all have the antennas on them, move them 40 miles away, and I have a response here, the cells 40 miles away have a response. What's the point? My identity isn't localized to this body. It will affect my cells wherever the heck they are.
I think this is what Einstein was referring to when he was talking about spooky action at a distance.
Well, this is what women have known for a long time, and men didn't have a science until now. And that is, how can mothers know when something goes wrong with one of their children and their children are on the other side of the world, an accident or something happened? And that's repeated over and over and over and over again. How can a woman know that? You ready? Because when a woman is carrying a child, some of the child's stem cells go into the mother and become part of the mother's stem cells. What's the point? The child's cell has the antennas tuned to the child, but they're in her body, just like a petri dish. She's carrying those cells in her body like a petri dish. So if the child's having a response on the other side of the world, just like I talked about, moving my cells over here, these cells, not in a petri dish, are now in my mother. And I'm having a response over here. My mother over there is simultaneously getting the same response. So that a woman knows about her children because she is carrying the cells of her children after the baby is born. The cells are still part of her system. That's what they found out when the first opening to this reality was they were looking at liver regeneration in patients and doing biopsies. And when they looked at some of the regeneration patterns in women who were having, regeneration in the liver, they found that the biopsies had a lot of cells with XY, which are male cells. It's like, how did you regenerate your female body liver with male cells? And the answer is, everyone who had a male child had stem cells from that male child that would contribute to rebuilding the liver of the mother. But studies have also revealed a lot of these child stem cells end up in the brain, so that the brain is like recording. And it's just amazing, And if I give an example, which always amazed me, is like they show, like, let's say, penguins. There's like 50,000 penguins. They're all over there. They have the babies, right? They go out and they get fishing and they come back. And guess what? They find a baby. Like, how the heck do you find a baby? There's thousands of babies, thousands of parents. They're all mingling. It's like, no, they're tuned in. They follow it. This is how a dog can find its way home when 1,000 miles away it left off and it meanders back. It's following a signal. And this is critical to recognize, and that brings in the whole spiritual aspect. Yeah, the signal is really who we are. The body is a translation device. I asked when I first understood about the signaling being outside, which is transforming my life, because it says my identity is not in here. And it's like, if my identity's not in here, I can't die. Why? I'm a television set playing the Bruce show. Okay? Television breaks, doesn't work. Television's dead. And I go, yeah, but is the broadcast still going? You go, yeah. Get another TV, turn it on, and tune it to the station, back on air. Get an embryo in the future, tune it to the same set of self-receptors, and that identity is back on the air, but now in a different biology. So we are the broadcast. We're not the television. The broadcast is there whether the television's there or not. And if we're online, because right now we're playing through our television sets, and I say, well, the television dies, broadcast is still there. It just requires another embryo with the same tuning, and I'll be back. But it doesn't make any difference if it's male or female, white or black, or whatever nationality. That's irrelevant. That's just a TV set. So we come and go through these bodies. And it's very exciting because if you understand it, and it could be false, I could be totally wrong. I can tell you right now. But my belief has changed my whole life in this regard. I think every one of us, in the first moment it came into our consciousness that we were mortal, or our parents were mortal, because as kids, your parents were getting older, and then you start to realize, yeah, but older people get older and then they die, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, my parents are getting older and they're going to die. And the first moment is, I'm going to lose my parents, are going to die. But then the bigger one comes like, wait, I'm going to die. And that fear of losing life becomes a predominant amount of energetic activity in your brain to assure that you don't everywhere you go. It's not consciously that I look at everything and try to assess, is this safe, not safe. It's not conscious, it's subconscious. But it uses tremendous amount of processing power to investigate every place you're at, every detail, in case something is threatening. Okay? I said, what happens if threatening isn't all of a sudden the major issue? I go, wow, you got a lot more energy all of a sudden because you're not looking all the scanning anymore. Life lightens up. Life's a lot easier because you don't realize how much amount of processing information goes into self-protection, self-preservation. But it's not on your mind that you walk out the door and say, can I get hit by this car? It's not that what you're thinking, but your subconscious is checking it all out. And that's a lot of activity. So weight comes off. If you really perceive it, and I could be totally wrong. Okay, so let's say there is no afterlife, but I can tell you what the difference is. My belief in the afterlife has eased my life so much, and I won't know until when? After I'm dead. So what does it mean? Well, I might as well enjoy it now, because the difference of being without fear versus having a life formerly based on fear is so profoundly different, because it's sort of like, hey, it'll be really cool. Maybe we go on like I think we really do. And yet, as I said, I live this way. I have a happier, healthier life at this moment because of it. And you say, yeah, but you might be wrong. And I go, yeah, but I only know if I'm wrong after I'm dead. And by then, I still had a wonderful life leading up to that versus the fearing. So it becomes really important for us, if we really own this, how freeing this is for how you carry out your life. Because when you take fear out of the equation, it provides so much more energy, because that energy was unconsciously being used. And so you were draining your energy without seeing you were draining your energy. But the moment you let go of the fear, you can feel like, wow, all of that power, I turned off a switch and all of that power comes back into my life. It's like, oh, God, I'm enjoying the energy much better, not in fear, than to put that much energy into protection.
So if the textbooks that are in the schools that are wrongly saying that genes control biology, if those were thrown out and instead epigenetics was being taught, you're saying that that would completely reshape civilization. Perhaps you can elaborate on that.
Because as I talked about in the beginning, which we never actually followed through on, now that I realize the previous conversation, I talked about the fact that we've been programmed, okay? And that these programs are perceptions of belief, and these programs then are shaping who we are. And then I said, yeah, then we're victims. Why? Because I didn't pick the genes and they control me, and I'm a victim and I have no power. I go, yeah, but epigenetics says, wait, your genetic readout is controlled by your environment and your perception of your environment. And in bad environments, you get sick, and in good environments, you get well. And I go, well, what's interesting? I say, I'm the one that picks the environment. I'm the one that picks my thoughts. If those are the things that control my life, then I am empowered. Why? I can change my environment. I can change my thoughts. And all of a sudden it says, well, wait, then you go from victim to master. I go, that's the difference. Epigenetics is, no, your genes don't control you. Your environment and your perception control you. And if people learn that, then they won't be the victims of all these diseases that they have beliefs and programs about. Okay. And that becomes very critical. People say genes control things. I say, well, the BRCA1 gene is very sensitive to women because it's so directly associated with breast cancer. I say, this is a breast cancer gene. I go, no, it doesn't cause breast cancer. You say, what do you mean it doesn't cause breast cancer? I say, 50% of the women with the gene never get the cancer. What was the point? Having the gene didn't cause cancer, but when you tell someone who has a belief that genes control life and they have the cancer gene, you are sending up a new belief. You are now suspect, and you're going to probably have to deal with this. And all of a sudden now my mentation, my perceptions are now altered in a very negative way because of a diagnosis, which is a nocebo influence, meaning a negative belief that I will manifest. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, there's no cancer gene. If their gene caused cancer, then having the gene would cause cancer. I say, no, there's no gene that does that. All genes have some level of being involved with people who never get the disease. And if you understand at that point, then the question is, then what caused the disease? Possession of the gene alone does not cause the disease. It's more. But if you just focus on the gene, then you've committed a person's life to misery, because if you say you have the gene and they believe genes control what they are, the rest of their life is fear.
So why is this falsehood allowed to perpetuate, this whole idea that genes control biology? Like, who wins by maintaining this falsehood? I mean, we'd be so much more empowered by realizing the power of epigenetics, but instead it's kept somewhat in the dark. It's not getting that front page kind of news. So who wins by keeping people ignorant?
You want the true answer?
Yeah.
The pharmaceutical industry has no advantage in giving you the true answer. If you can control your own health, why would you buy drugs? And if the pharmaceutical industry was some small shop around the corner, it would make, no difference to the world. But when the pharmaceutical industry is probably the number 3 corporate enterprise on the entire planet, the idea of self-empowerment and the ability to heal yourself without any drugs, and that's the conclusion of it, would undermine the entire multi-trillion dollar industry. And if it was only $1,000 industry, then who gives a damn? But when it becomes multi-trillions, life is irrelevant to, the people's lives are irrelevant. Don't get in the way of trillions of dollars. And the pharmaceutical company is shaping the medical profession's pursuit. It's what they say. They send around all the reps and tell people, this is what you do and this is what you do. And doctors are, oh, okay, I'll do that one. I'll do that one. They're just intermediaries. They're not making the control of the biology. They're responding to other people. A lot of people think, oh, the AMA, that's the American Medical Association. They're making up all the rules, regulations, and all that. And I go, they represent doctors. I go, 85% of doctors don't even belong to the AMA. They don't like it. And yet the AMA and the drug companies are locked together so that whatever comes out of the AMA is a bias toward benefit of the drug company. So when you hear these things, even doctors want to pull out of it, but it's a system. They say this is standard practice. And if you're a doctor and you violate standard practice, which is prescribe a drug for every patient who comes in, whether a drug can work or not, prescribe a drug. And the reason is that is like, well, if you don't prescribe a drug as a doctor and a patient comes in later with something that got really worse and they said, but you didn't tell me to get the drug, then the doctor is liable for a lawsuit. So standard operating procedure is, even if you know this drug isn't going to work, we recommend you prescribe this drug, this other drug, like an antibiotic. If you have a virus infection, antibiotics don't kill viruses, but people are given that. Why? Because if I didn't give them anything, then I'm liable for a lawsuit. So Jesus, the default is give them a drug prescription. That means you did something. And if you don't do that, you lose your license. So what does that mean? I am enslaved to the pharmaceutical industry, because if I violate the standard procedures which they set up, then I lose my license. And then all of a sudden you realize they're not operating on their own. They're operating under a licensing program with censure. That means I can take away your license because you didn't prescribe a drug.
Wow. Okay. And what's been your most satisfying research with all of your experiments?
My own experiment, because as I said, having the knowledge of what I talked about didn't change anything about my life. Having the knowledge and then rewriting programs that conform to the knowledge is what changed my life. So therefore, I'm an experimenter myself, because I didn't believe in any of this stuff. And even though academically I could tell people about it, my subconscious still didn't have that belief, and my life didn't improve no matter how smart I got, until what? Changing the program. And then I said, oh my God, I'm like every one of you, same people out there. We've all been programmed, and we manifest our program. And yet, being creators, that's how we can manifest a program. We were the ones that didn't set the program. We're creating on the basis of other people's programs of what we can do and what we can't do and all these kinds of things like that. And so I appreciate this wonderful opportunity to be with you on this show so I can talk to all those wonderful people out there in the audience who are cultural creatives. If they're watching us on this show already, they're thinking there's other answers besides the ones they got in school here. And so I appreciate them. Why? Because if they understand what we're talking about, like myself, if each of us changes ourselves, then we change the world. But I can't change the world if I'm still using my old program, because my old program will then 95% of the day sabotage every effort that I was going to try and make it change the world. There was an old hippie thing back from years ago, and it said, before you go out and before you go out and change the world, clean up your own backyard. And really what it says, I want to be a promoter of evolution, but if I'm not living that evolution, then how the heck am I promoting it? And as I said, when I went out in the beginning, you guys talked about it, my words were meaningless to everybody else because they saw that my life, if I was supposed to have knowledge about this, then how come my life doesn't look like I have knowledge about that? And therefore, each one of our listeners out there is a really important part of this entire process because they have to look at their life and say, is it really working the way you want it? Are the diseases you're manifesting, where did they come from? And then when we recognize that current science says about 1% of diseases based on genetics, that should open up our minds and go, well, if 1% is on genetics, where the hell the rest of it come from? And that's what we're talking about. It's how we respond to the world, which is empowering because if you know that, then it says, then I can change how I respond to the world. And if I do that, I have power. And that is your intention and my intention. And we have a wonderful audience of people who want what we have to a large degree, and what we have is based on what we learned. If we didn't learn it, we wouldn't be here either with it. Okay, and so I wasn't born into this world with all of this stuff. I had to struggle until I learned it, and when I learned it and realized I didn't have to struggle, that was the opportunity to turn it around. And I'm a happy guy about it.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Dr. Bruce Lipton, and thanks to all of you for sticking around to the end. I hope you got a tremendous amount of value out of this. And for those of you that would also like to become a happy camper, you can pick up Dr. Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief, on Amazon. And you can also, if you want to take your education further, you might want to take his online course, The Biology of Belief. I'll leave a link for all of these things down below, and I'll leave a link for the course in this top right corner of the video. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to chatting more with you in the future. This is D.S. Yvonne at reprogrammingmind.com. Bye for now.